At 5 a.m. in New York, the sky is saturated with Pisces. The Sun at 2 degrees Pisces. The Moon at 22 degrees Pisces, sitting directly with Mars at the same degree. Mercury in Pisces. Venus in Pisces. The North Node in Pisces. This is not a passing mood. It is a stellium, a concentration of water that sets the emotional climate of the entire day. When this much Pisces gathers, the tone of reality shifts slightly, edges soften, time feels less linear. The morning may not begin with urgency, but with atmosphere. You might wake up and feel like you were already in the middle of something before your feet touched the floor. A dream lingering, a thought without a clear beginning, a feeling that doesn't fully belong to a specific event. This is what permeability feels like. Not weakness, not confusion, just thinner walls between you and everything else. At the same time, Saturn has just entered Aries at 0 degrees. Neptune is newly in Aries. Pluto is in Aquarius. Uranus remains late in Taurus. Structurally, something new is forming in the background of your life. There is a quiet sense that a chapter is beginning, but today is not the day you charge forward into it. Today is the threshold. And thresholds are emotional before they are visible. Under a Pisces stellium, the inner world becomes louder than the outer one. Not dramatic, not chaotic, just more present. You may notice you are more affected by tone than by content, more moved by memory than by plan, more aware of what is unsaid in a room. This does not mean you are regressing. It does not mean you are losing clarity. It means the system is prioritizing feeling over execution. Pisces energy often invites a subtle inner shift before any outer change occurs. The shift is this. Instead of asking, "What should I do next?" the question becomes, "What am I actually carrying right now?" Before you step into new responsibilities, before you define yourself differently under Saturn in Aries, there is a dissolving process happening. Old emotional residues surfacing, old roles softening. If the morning feels slower than usual, that is not laziness, it is recalibration. With the Moon and Mars together in Pisces, there is movement in the emotional body, but it is not sharp or aggressive. It is like a tide rising, a quiet internal push. Something inside you may want expression, but not confrontation. Action, but not force. This is a feeling first day. The human experience under this sky becomes more fluid. You may sense that you are less armored, more aware of your own tenderness, more aware of other people's moods, more aware of the collective tone that hums in the background of 2026. And that awareness is not a problem to solve. It is information to notice. The sky is not demanding productivity, it is inviting attunement. Before you try to shape the day, it may help to recognize the water you are already standing in. When a Pisces stellium moves through the sky like this, especially with the Moon conjunct Mars at 22 degrees, the first place you feel it is not in your schedule, it's in your body. Before a thought forms, there is a sensation. You might notice it as soon as you wake up. A heaviness behind the eyes, as if you've been processing something all night. A slight tightness in the throat that doesn't quite turn into words. A tenderness in the chest that feels like emotion without a clear storyline. With the Moon and Mars blending in Pisces, the emotional body is activated, but not in a sharp, adrenaline-driven way. It's diffuse, it's tidal. Mars usually pushes. In Pisces, it seeps. So instead of a clear burst of motivation, you may feel a low-grade restlessness. Your shoulders might feel like they want to move, but you're not sure toward what. You might open your phone with an urge to respond to something immediately, not because it's urgent, but because you feel something stirring and you want to discharge it. That's the subtle urgency of this conjunction. It can show up as an impulse to send the text right away, to clarify something before it grows, to fix a misunderstanding that may not even be confirmed, or, on the opposite end, to withdraw completely because the emotional volume feels too high. But before any of that becomes behavior, it shows up in micro signals. You might sigh more often today. You might feel your jaw clench briefly when reading an email. You might notice your stomach tighten when someone's tone shifts, even slightly. Pisces blurs boundaries, so the nervous system may register emotional changes in the environment faster than your rational mind does. Mercury in Pisces amplifies this. Thoughts are less linear, more image-based. You might find yourself drifting in a meeting, replaying a conversation from yesterday, or imagining how something could go wrong without fully realizing you've started that mental movie. The body often reacts before you consciously identify the story. A subtle flush in the face, a small contraction in the abdomen. This is not dysfunction, it's sensitivity online. And with Venus also in Pisces, there's an added layer of relational awareness. You may feel more attuned to whether someone seems distant, distracted, or slightly off. The body might lean forward when someone you care about speaks, searching for cues, or it might subtly recoil if you sense disconnection. The key here is not to judge these signals. Instead of interpreting fatigue in your shoulders as weakness, you might see it as emotional processing. Instead of labeling fogginess as incompetence, you might recognize it as your system metabolizing more than usual. With Jupiter in Cancer forming a supportive undercurrent, the body is asking for nourishment, not correction. You may feel drawn to warmth, to slower movements, to sitting with your coffee a little longer instead of rushing out the door. These are not indulgences under this sky, they are regulation strategies. And here's something important. Because Uranus is late in Taurus, small disruptions in routine can feel amplified in the body. A meeting rescheduled, traffic heavier than expected, a delayed response. Under normal conditions, these are minor. Under a Pisces stellium, your nervous system might register them as bigger than they are. If you feel a sudden spike of anxiety or a wave of emotion that seems disproportionate, pause before assigning meaning. Notice where it lands physically. Is it in your chest, your gut, your throat? Then gently ask, what is my body reacting to right now? Not to fix it, just to observe. This is a day where the body speaks first. If you slow down enough to listen, you may realize that many of the impulses to act are simply attempts to regulate sensation. And sometimes, awareness alone is enough to soften the wave before it turns into a reaction. With energy like this, the shift from inner sensation to outer life can feel subtle but noticeable. You carry the morning's emotional tone into your emails, your conversations, your commute. And because Mercury, Venus, the Moon, Mars, the Sun, and the North Node are all in Pisces, the line between what is happening externally and what is happening internally is thinner than usual. In practical terms, this may show up in communication first. You might read a short message from a coworker and immediately start interpreting tone. You might notice yourself pausing longer before replying, trying to sense what is really being asked. Or you might respond quickly, trying to smooth something over before it becomes awkward. Pisces fills in the blanks with narrative. When information is incomplete, imagination steps in. Under Mercury in Pisces, your thinking process is less bullet point and more impressionistic. You may struggle to summarize your ideas concisely, yet feel them deeply. In meetings, you might track the emotional undercurrent of the room more than the agenda itself. That's not a flaw, it's data. But if you're not aware of it, you may leave feeling drained without knowing why. Work tasks can also feel different today. With the Moon conjunct Mars in Pisces, action is emotionally motivated. If something feels meaningful, you may dive into it with quiet focus. If something feels disconnected or purely transactional, your energy might scatter. You might start one task, drift into another, then circle back again. Instead of labeling this as lack of discipline, it may help to recognize that your motivation system is responding to emotional resonance more than external pressure. In relationships, Venus in Pisces increases compassion, but also increases projection. If someone seems slightly distant, you might wonder if you've done something wrong. If someone is warm, you might feel unusually moved by it. Small gestures can feel amplified, so can small disappointments. This is also where overextension can occur. Mars in Pisces can act from empathy, which is beautiful, but it can also say yes to things that don't truly align, just to avoid discomfort. You might volunteer to take on extra work because you sense someone else is overwhelmed. You might agree to plans when your body actually wants rest. In the moment it feels generous, later it can feel depleting. Because Uranus is late in Taurus, disruptions in routine may create subtle anxiety. A plan changing at the last minute could trigger more reaction than usual, not because it's catastrophic, but because your system is already processing more than usual. Stability feels more precious under this sky. There's also a quieter layer involving Pluto in Aquarius. As you move through the day, you may notice subtle reflections about where you belong. Which conversations feel nourishing? Which digital spaces feel draining? Which group dynamics feel aligned with who you are becoming? You don't need to make decisions about it today, but you may notice it. Overall, daily life under a Pisces stellium is less about productivity metrics and more about emotional bandwidth. You are not managing tasks today, you are managing exposure. The opportunity is not to eliminate sensitivity, it's to see how it's shaping your reactions in real time. You might ask yourself, in a simple moment at your desk or in your car, am I responding to what is actually happening or to the story I'm layering onto it? That question doesn't shut down emotion, it refines it. And in a day like this, refinement is more powerful than force. The core pattern of today is sensitivity without withdrawal. That is the work. Not becoming less sensitive, not pretending you are unaffected, and not disappearing into avoidance. The invitation is to stay present with what you feel without letting it pull you out of participation. With the Moon and Mars together in late Pisces, the emotional body is not passive. It's activated. You may feel waves move through you that don't correspond neatly to events. A sudden swell of tenderness, a flash of irritation, a moment of grief that seems to rise from nowhere. Pisces does not always give you a clean origin story for what you're feeling, and when feelings don't have clear edges, the instinct is often to protect yourself. Protection can look like withdrawal, pulling back from conversations, delaying responses, turning inward and deciding it's safer not to engage. Or it can look like the opposite extreme, over-functioning, becoming the emotional anchor for everyone else, so you don't have to sit with your own tides. Both are understandable responses under a Pisces stellium. When emotional permeability increases, the nervous system wants containment. If you don't consciously create that containment, the system will try to find it in avoidance or control. This is why the title matters. Managing sensitivity without withdrawal. Withdrawal can be physical, like cancelling plans or avoiding interaction, but it can also be internal, numbing out, scrolling for hours. distracting yourself with noise so you don't have to track what's moving inside. Pisces energy leans toward dissolution. It wants to blur, to merge, to escape harsh lines. But Saturn, newly in Aries, is quietly asking for something else. Structure. Not rigidity, structure. So the pattern today becomes this balancing act. Can you feel deeply without isolating? Can you notice the wave without labeling it as a threat? Can you stay in the conversation, in the meeting, in the relationship, while also tracking your own internal climate? With Venus in Pisces, there is real compassion available. You may feel more forgiving, more willing to see someone's struggle. But if you're not careful, compassion can become self-erasure. You might prioritize someone else's emotional state over your own comfort. And with Mars in Pisces, action motivated by empathy can turn into overextension. You help, you soothe, you adjust, you accommodate, and only later do you realize you needed something too. So the pattern is not about suppressing sensitivity, it's about holding it. Imagine the difference between being swept out by a current and standing waist-deep in water. The water is still there, you still feel it moving, but you have footing. That footing today comes from awareness. From noticing when you're about to disappear into someone else's emotional field. From recognizing when you're about to check out entirely because it feels like too much. Sensitivity is not the problem. Losing yourself inside it is. That's the line. And today, you get to feel where that line actually is. Under this sky, staying present with your own experience while remaining engaged with the world is a quiet form of strength. Not dramatic, not visible, but deeply stabilizing. And that is the pattern worth practicing today. If we look a little deeper at the sky, the intensity of this pattern makes more sense. A Pisces stellium concentrates energy in one emotional register. The Sun at 2 degrees Pisces sets the core tone. The Moon at 22 degrees Pisces, joined with Mars at the same degree, activates that tone in real time. Mercury and Venus in Pisces shape how you think and relate. The North Node in Pisces adds a subtle directional pull toward compassion and surrender. This isn't just a sensitive day, it's saturation. When so many personal planets gather in Pisces, the psyche shifts from control to permeability. The usual strategies of logic, productivity, and linear planning don't feel as reliable. Instead, awareness moves through intuition, mood, and subtle perception. At the same time, Saturn has just crossed into Aries at 0 degrees. That is significant. Aries is about identity and initiative. Saturn is about structure and responsibility. So in the background, there is a new chapter forming around self-definition. A quiet question of who you are becoming and how you want to lead your own life. But before you build something new in Aries, Pisces asks you to dissolve what no longer fits. That's why sensitivity feels heightened. It's not random. It's part of a clearing process. Old emotional patterns, old roles, old ways of coping may feel more visible today because they are loosening. Neptune, newly in Aries, adds another layer. There is an emerging vision of a different version of you, but it's not fully formed yet. So the system oscillates between softness and subtle urgency, between dissolving and wanting to initiate. Chiron in Aries at 23 degrees quietly underscores this. There may be an awareness of past narratives around strength, the belief that you have to handle everything alone, that showing emotion equals weakness. Under this sky, those narratives feel less convincing. Sensitivity doesn't feel like a flaw, it feels like information. Meanwhile, Uranus at 27 degrees Taurus adds instability in the material layer. Finances, schedules, routines, physical structures may feel slightly less predictable. Even small changes can ripple through the nervous system because the emotional field is already amplified. And Pluto in Aquarius continues its long, slow shift around community and power. Today, that might show up as subtle questions about belonging. Where do you feel emotionally seen? Where do you feel like you have to edit yourself? All of this explains why the body is on alert and why the instinct to withdraw can feel strong. The sky is holding two movements at once, Pisces dissolving, Aries beginning. One softens identity, the other asks you to define it. That tension creates emotional data, so the pattern is not a personal failing, it is a reflection of the current sky. Sensitivity is amplified because the system is recalibrating. And understanding that allows you to meet the experience with more context and less self-criticism. Here's the reframe. On a day like this, it's easy to assume that heightened emotion means you're regressing, that if you feel foggy, tender, or slightly overwhelmed, you must be losing ground, especially if you're someone who values growth, clarity, and self-awareness. But under a Pisces stellium, sensitivity is not a setback. It's exposure to more data than usual. You are not weaker today, you are more open. And openness requires more skill than armor ever did. And openness can feel destabilizing if you're used to functioning through control. If you've built an identity around being the strong one, the composed one, the rational one, then days like this can feel inconvenient. You may catch yourself thinking, why am I reacting like this? I should be past this by now. That's the old frame. The new frame is this. You're not reacting more because you're behind. You're noticing more because your system is less armored. There's a difference. With Saturn newly in Aries, there is a growing call to define yourself more clearly. But clarity doesn't mean rigidity. It doesn't mean shutting down emotion. It means learning how to stand inside your sensitivity without collapsing into it. Instead of asking, how do I get rid of this feeling? Try asking, what is this feeling showing me? Instead of assuming that intensity equals dysfunction, consider that it might equal relevance. Strong emotion often points towards something that matters, something that hasn't been fully acknowledged. This is also where the chosen one narrative of the past can be gently updated. You don't have to transcend your emotions to be evolving. You don't have to rise above the human experience to be growing. Sometimes, the real strength is staying with the wave instead of escaping it. When you feel something deeply today, the goal is not to dramatize it or suppress it. It's to remain present with it while keeping your footing. That's maturity underwater, energy. And if you notice yourself wanting to withdraw completely, see if you can soften that impulse just slightly, not by forcing interaction, but by staying connected to one small anchor, your breath, your body, one honest sentence in a conversation instead of silence. Sensitivity does not disqualify you from leadership in your own life. It refines it. Under this sky, the shift is subtle but important. You are not here to eliminate your depth. You are here to manage it without disappearing inside it. So how do you move through a day like this in a way that feels steady instead of scattered? Start small. Start physical. With this much Pisces, awareness can drift upward into thought and emotion very quickly. Bringing it back down into the body is not a technique, it's a recalibration. Feel your feet inside your shoes when you stand. Notice the weight of your body in the chair when you sit. Let your breath drop lower into your abdomen instead of staying high in your chest. You don't need a 20-minute meditation, you need moments of contact. If you notice heaviness behind your eyes or tightness in your shoulders, don't immediately interpret it as burnout or failure. It may simply be emotional processing. With Jupiter in Cancer offering support, small acts of care go further than usual today. A warm meal instead of something rushed, a glass of water before another coffee, stepping outside for 5 minutes without your phone. These are not productivity hacks. They are containment. When communication feels loaded, slow the pace slightly. You don't have to answer immediately. You don't have to decode every tone shift. If you feel the urge to send a message from a place of heightened emotion, pause long enough to ask, is this response coming from clarity or from discomfort? Mars in Pisces can move quickly to relieve tension. Saturn in Aries asks you to make sure the movement aligns with who you're becoming. If you feel pulled to say yes out of guilt, check your body first. Does your chest expand or contract when you imagine agreeing? Alignment often shows up as expansion. Obligation often shows up as tightening. And if you feel the urge to withdraw entirely, see if you can choose partial engagement instead of total disappearance. Maybe you don't attend the large group gathering, but you text one person you trust. Maybe you don't solve the entire relational tension, but you speak one honest sentence. Integration today is not about mastering your emotions. It's about staying in relationship with them. As the day unfolds, you might choose one emotion that stood out. Just one. Instead of analyzing it endlessly, you might ask what it was protecting. Anger may be protecting vulnerability. Disappointment may be protecting hope. Longing may be protecting desire. When emotion becomes protective rather than problematic, your inner world feels less adversarial. The sky today supports gentleness paired with structure, softness paired with boundaries, compassion paired with discernment. You don't have to harden to move forward, but you also don't have to dissolve. Walking that line, quietly and imperfectly, is enough for today. As the evening settles in, the emotional volume may soften slightly, but the water is still there. The moon continues through late Pisces, and you may feel a natural pull toward quieter spaces. Not dramatic isolation, just a preference for fewer inputs, dimmer light, slower conversation. This is not a night for bold declarations or major decisions. The sky is not asking you to reinvent yourself before bed. It's asking you to integrate what you noticed. Maybe there was one moment today when you felt more affected than usual, one reaction that surprised you, one wave that rose and passed. Instead of dissecting it, you might simply acknowledge it. That happened. I felt that. It mattered. Under a Pisces stellium, completion rarely looks like resolution. It looks like softening. If there is anything to carry forward from today, it's this awareness. Sensitivity is not something you have to eliminate in order to function. It's something you learn to manage with structure and self-respect. You are allowed to feel deeply and still participate in your life. You are allowed to need grounding without withdrawing from connection. You are allowed to respond slowly instead of reactively. As you move into the rest of your week, you don't need to amplify your energy. You don't need to transcend anything. Just keep noticing the water you're swimming in. Adjust your footing when needed. Create structure where it helps. Soften where it's safe. And if this conversation supported you in making sense of your inner weather today, stay connected to this space. Not as an escape from reality, but as a way to move through it with more awareness. That awareness is quiet, but it changes how you walk through the world. As the evening settles in, the emotional volume may soften slightly, but the water is still there. The moon continues through late Pisces, and you may feel a natural pull toward quieter spaces. Not dramatic isolation, just a preference for fewer inputs, dimmer light, slower conversation. This is not a night for bold declarations or major decisions. The sky is not asking you to reinvent yourself before bed. It's asking you to integrate what you noticed. Maybe there was one moment today when you felt more affected than usual, one reaction that surprised you, one wave that rose and passed. Instead of dissecting it, you might simply acknowledge it. That happened. I felt that. It mattered. Under a Pisces stellium, completion rarely looks like resolution. It looks like softening. If there is anything to carry forward from today, it's this awareness. Sensitivity is not something you have to eliminate in order to function. It's something you learn to manage with structure and self-respect. You are allowed to feel deeply and still participate in your life. You are allowed to need grounding without withdrawing from connection. You are allowed to respond slowly instead of reactively. As you move into the rest of your week, you don't need to amplify your energy. You don't need to transcend anything. Just keep noticing the water you're swimming in. Adjust your footing when needed. Create structure where it helps. Soften where it's safe. And if this conversation supported you in making sense of your inner weather today, stay connected to this space. Not as an escape from reality, but as a way to move through it with more awareness. That awareness is quiet, but it changes how you walk through the world.